How are you, sir?
Good afternoon. How are you doing, Lori?
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for, we're going to get right into it. I want to thank you for taking time to visit with us today. There is certainly a lot of information and a lot of topics for us to talk about, but I wanted to focus specifically on get a border update from you and how it relates or how it could impact business. And I have a couple of questions, but I want to go ahead and turn it off to you and let you kind of give us an update.
Well, the update is that the challenges we're seeing, they keep getting worse and worse. The economic challenges from Washington, we're seeing trillions in new spending. We are seeing the majorities trying to push through trillions in new taxes, which would obviously hammer small businesses and job creators. And then when it comes to our southern border, the chaos that is unfolding on our southern border is unprecedented. It is unlike anything I've seen in the 9 years I've represented Texas in the Senate. Our southern border is completely uncontrolled right now. We've had over 1.3 million people cross illegally since Joe Biden became president. And we are on a path to more than 2 million people crossing illegally this year. It is the highest rate of illegal immigration in 21 years. And the chaos just keeps getting worse and worse. I'll tell you, our Border Patrol agents are demoralized. They are depressed. They're not allowed to do their jobs. Their political superiors prevent them from following the law and enforcing the border. And in fact, when they do try to do their job, President Biden attacks and demonizes them and threatens that they will pay for doing their job. It is horrific. There are hundreds of thousands of children who are coming in. They are placed in the Biden cages. The Biden cages are larger and more full than any cages we have had. When I was last in the Rio Grande Valley several weeks ago, the rate of COVID positivity in the Biden cages was over 24%. The Biden administration is releasing illegal aliens in Texas and across the country who are COVID positive. Many of them, they're not even testing, they're releasing them. We saw in Del Rio where there were over 15,000 illegal immigrants, primarily from Haiti, gathered under the bridge, overwhelming Border Patrol's capacity to do anything about it. And the maddening thing is that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris don't intend to do anything to change this. The public health crisis, the humanitarian crisis, the national security crisis, their reaction is there is no crisis, nothing to see here. And, you know, it's worth stepping back and saying, all right, how did we get into this chaos? What happened? And it was three specific political decisions that Joe Biden made the very first day in office. Number one, he immediately halted construction of the border wall. Number two, he reinstated the failed policy of catch and release. And number three, most significantly, he ended the incredibly successful Remain in Mexico policy. Those three decisions caused the border crisis. And we could end the border crisis. We could solve this crisis if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were willing to reverse those political decisions. They're not. They've made promises to the open border radicals in the Democratic Party. And so their intention is to continue this chaos every day they're in office. It is heartbreaking, and Texas is paying the price for it.
Well, now, didn't Texas and Missouri sue the administration? Yes. And about the ruling on the Remain in Mexico? Now, from what I understand, they have to go back and comply with that, but they don't plan on doing that until mid-November.
Yep. So that's right. So stepping back for a second, what is the Remain in Mexico agreement? Yeah. Remain in Mexico is an agreement that President Trump negotiated with the government of Mexico. And the government of Mexico agreed that individuals who cross illegally into Mexico, primarily from Central and South America, can remain in Mexico while their U.S. asylum cases are proceeding. And that agreement worked spectacularly well. So much so that last year, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. That was the direct result of Remain in Mexico, the lowest rate in 45 years. On day one, Joe Biden rips that agreement to shreds, says the Biden administration, the United States will no longer follow it. Immediately, the numbers spike through the roof. Now, you're right, Texas and other states sued the Biden administration in federal court and won. A federal court in Texas ordered the Biden administration to continue complying by the Remain in Mexico policy. That's a terrific victory. And just this week, there are headlines that the Biden administration is announcing they're going to return to the Remain in Mexico policy. So if you just read the headlines, that's encouraging. The problem is the story is a lot deeper than the headlines. That's what they're telling the federal court so that they're not held in contempt and literally sent to jail. But everything we are hearing from the Border Patrol on the ground is they're not doing a thing. And if you think about it, an international agreement, look, Mexico didn't want to enter into the Remain in Mexico agreement. They did so because President Trump exerted enormous force to pressure them into doing it. In this case, all the Biden administration has to tell Mexico is, gosh, a court is ordering us to remain in this agreement that wink, wink, we really don't want to be in. And it's very simple for Mexico to refuse to comply and for them to say, Judge, we can't help it. Mexico's a sovereign nation. They're not complying. And so what I'm hearing from Border Patrol agents on the ground is that the administration's doing zero to comply with the federal court order. And that's why the numbers keep going up and up and up and up, and the crisis keeps getting worse.
So what can Texas do? I mean, we've got 2 more years.
Yeah. Look, that's the $64,000 question, and it is an enormously difficult question. There's a lot of things Texas is doing right now. Texas has DPS forces on the ground who are helping with securing the border, who are there, who have equipment. You know, I've been with the DPS forces out on their boats. They have gunboats on the Rio Grande that the state of Texas, the taxpayers pay for. They have planes. I've been up in the Texas DPS planes that had infrared that can see at night and spot the traffickers coming across. In fact, amazingly enough, the state of Texas has much, much better equipment than the feds. And I mean, the DPS gunboats are 35 feet long. They're these shining steel gunboats with mounted machine guns on the front and back. The Border Patrol boats are these little rubber Zodiac rafts. I mean, it's sad, the comparison between the two. So the state is investing personnel on the ground in terms of securing the border. The state is also investing money to begin building the wall again. Both of those are positive steps. Here's the real challenge, though. Historically, under federal law, the authority to deport someone has been exclusively a federal responsibility. So when DPS catches someone, the way it used to work is you hand them over to the feds and the feds deport them. Mm-hmm. What we have never seen, and we're facing, it's a constitutional crisis because we have a president who just doesn't give a damn. We've never seen a president out and out refuse to enforce the law. They just don't deport people. They just let them go. And so the Texas DPS officers are incredibly frustrated because when they catch someone and hand them to the feds say, thanks, okay, you can go now, and they let them go. And that challenge, I can tell you, it has legal experts really pressing the edges of what else can Texas do when you have a president who is outright defying federal law. I think
isn't that a crime?
It is a violation of his constitutional oath. Whether it's a crime or not, you'd have to find a provision of the criminal code that was violated. But Article 2 of the Constitution requires that the president take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And Joe Biden is not doing that. In fact, he is defying the federal law with a brazenness. Look, we thought Obama was bad, and Obama was bad. But under the Obama administration, they had many, many deportations. They were actually following the law to some extent. He would carve out categories where he wouldn't follow the law. But what Biden is doing is just wholesale, nope, we're not in the deportation business. And that is the direct cause of this crisis. And what's even more maddening, in Congress, because we have a Democratic majority in the House and a Democratic majority in the Senate, nobody cares. I'm on the Senate Judiciary Committee. We're 10 months into this year. You know, we haven't had a single hearing on the border crisis. The Senate Democrats don't care. It's simply not happening. We've had 5 hearings on the Democrats' federal takeover of elections, where they want to strike down voter fraud laws all across the country. We've had 4 hearings on amnesty, which they view as a political priority because they want more Democratic voters to stay in power. There is no Democrat in the Senate who cares about the hundreds of thousands of kids being brought in by human traffickers, being physically assaulted, being sexually assaulted, being put in cages, getting COVID. They simply do not care. The consequence of which is that Texas is bearing the price. And I'll tell you, South Texas, it is overwhelming law enforcement. It's overwhelming education. It's overwhelming healthcare. And Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's answer is tough luck.
So there's this mother of all caravans coming.
Yep.
I don't know when it's going to get here, but they're saying tens of thousands. And so what are we going to do?
Well, I met a couple of weeks ago with the foreign minister of Panama. And, you know, Panama, as you know, is right at the juncture of North America and South America. And she described how just this year, Panama has seen over 80,000 Haitians, people who fled Haiti, and they'd gone to South America, and they were living in South America, actually living pretty good lives in South America. But then under Biden and Harris, word came out, hey, it's open border in America. If you come to America, you get to stay. And the foreign minister of Panama said they've seen over 80,000 Haitians crossing their border illegally on the way to the United States. And unfortunately, Biden and Harris intend to do nothing about that. I met a couple of weeks ago with 2 of the top officials at Border Patrol and ICE under President Trump, both of whom said, look, when there was a caravan coming, they would get on the phone with the governments of the countries they were crossing through and say, you better stop them. Don't let them. And they would do it because we would use our pressure to get them to do that. In this instance, the Biden administration is not asking anyone to stop them. You know, the Panamanian foreign minister told me her calls to the White House go unanswered. They won't even return her calls. She convened a gathering of 11 countries in Central and South America, all of whom are facing the crisis of this illegal immigration, all caused by Joe Biden. I mean, it's amazing the chaos that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are causing is not just limited to the United States, but it's throughout the Western Hemisphere. They had a conference of foreign ministers of 11 nations. They all came. They invited the Biden administration. Secretary of State refused to come. Sent an underling instead to attend the meeting because it simply was not something they care about. And this is, it's brazen.
So if this continues and we've got, I don't know, 60,000 more that come in or more, what's the potential impact here? I mean, where is that going to put us?
What the Democrats hope is that they will let in millions and millions and millions of people illegally. They will all become citizens and they will all vote Democrat. This is a straightforward political calculation. And so you don't have Democrats who care about, look, I brought 19 senators down to the Rio Grande Valley a couple of months ago. We went out on the river. We saw one man floating dead in the river who had died trying to cross. We saw an 11-year-old girl who had been gang raped by the human traffickers. It is horrific. We met with law enforcement who described, so the cartels that are bringing these people in, they charge between about $3,000 and $8,000 to cross the border. And they put on the illegal immigrants a colored armband, a colored wristband. The color corresponds to how much money they paid and how many thousands more dollars they owe. When they get here on the northern side of the river, they're often put in stash houses. The stash houses are rough, violent places. They're physically assaulted in those stash houses. Many of the children, particularly the girls, are sexually assaulted. But the Biden administration takes these folks, releases them into the United States, and distributes them all over the country. So look, we're Texans. We're facing this firsthand, but this problem is not isolated to Texas or South Texas. If you're in any significant city across the country, if you're in New York City or Chicago or Detroit or Philadelphia or San Francisco or Los Angeles, you are getting thousands of illegal immigrants who are coming in the wristbands. Many of them still owe the cartels thousands of dollars. And so when they arrive, let's say in Los Angeles, they're working for the cartels. They are employees of the cartels.
Wow.
And they can't stiff the cartels because the cartels know who their family is. And if they stiff the cartel, they'll kill their mom, they'll kill their dad, they'll kill their sister. And so the cartels now have people working for them in every major city in America. And particularly for the teenage girls, many of them will arrive in a city and get placed in a house of prostitution to work off their debt. And they're forced into forced prostitution. And the way the cartels do it, they'll give them room and board, and then they will have a ledger. It's like an old plantation. They would charge them each night for room and board, for food. They charge them for shampoo, for soap, for everything they use. They have a charge. I believe the charge is $30 for the scissors to cut the ankle band off their ankle if they have an ankle tracker. And what happens, you think about a 15, 16-year-old girl from Honduras, from Guatemala, from Nicaragua, who says, hey, I want to come to America. I want to come to the promised land. I want freedom. And 3 months later, she is living in this hell as a slave in forced prostitution, or else the cartels will kill her and kill her family. This is horrific. And the media doesn't care, and the Democrats don't care. And it's, I think we have nobody can defend this. You can't look at what's happening and give an argument that this is compassionate, that this is humane, that this makes sense. This is evil.
Well, and the sad part of it is what I'm hearing from you is it's going to continue for the next 2 years.
Yes.
So there's really nothing that can be done is what I'm hearing.
Well, I'm going to continue shining the light. I'm going to continue bringing senators down there. I'm going to continue telling the stories. You know, what part of the reason this is happening, and a group that bears a lot of responsibility for this is the media, the corrupt corporate media. Part of the reason Joe Biden and Kamala Harris believe they can just ignore this problem is they trust CNN and ABC and CBS and NBC just to pretend it doesn't exist, to bury their heads in the sand. And they trust, the media is now so corrupt, the corporate media, they don't want to cover this story. And we live in a weird and polarized society. So the right listens to right-wing media, the left listens to left-wing media. So if you watch Fox News, you know all about the border crisis. If you watch CNN, there is no border crisis. These children don't matter to CNN. They don't exist. They are phantoms. I would invite CNN hosts, come down to Brooks County with me. Brooks County is just north of the border. It's a county north of the border. Brooks County, the farmers and ranchers there regularly discover dead bodies on their properties because the cartels, if you're at all weak or vulnerable, if you're elderly, if you're a woman who's pregnant, if you're sick, they just abandon you. And people die by the hundreds out in the hot desert heat. And so farmers and ranchers regularly just encounter dead bodies of people the cartels have abandoned to die. And that story doesn't get told.
Yeah.
Because CNN doesn't want to tell that story. They have a political agenda. Their political agenda is the same as the Democrats, which is maximize the number of what they see as Democratic voters and do nothing that gets in the way of that message. And that means the rest of us just need to tell the stories of what's happening, because when people see what's happening, they're horrified.
Right. we're kind of in a perfect storm, so to speak. We've got so many other issues to add on top of this, but the supply chain
Yes.
being one, and I know that's another problem that doesn't look like it's going to be solved anytime soon. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it is an enormous challenge. I think in many ways it is the product of how dependent our economy has become on China. I think China is getting more and more antagonistic, more and more of an adversary to the United States. And I think the Biden administration is scared to stand up to China. And if you look at the Biden administration's talking points, they say, oh, these supply chain disruptions, they're going to continue as far as the eye can see, no plans to change it. And you've got a combination, if you look at the economic and domestic policy, it doesn't make any sense. So let's take, for example, let's take energy. Let's take oil and gas. We're Texans. Oil and gas and energy drive a lot of jobs in the state of Texas. The Biden administration, and I don't believe this is hyperbole, wants to destroy every oil and gas job in the United States, wants to put everyone out of business. First day in office, Biden shut down the Keystone Pipeline, signed an executive order. He killed 11,000 jobs with the stroke of a pen. 8,000 of those were high-paying union jobs, all gone because Biden said, your jobs don't matter. John Kerry's response was, learn to code. If you're in the pipeline construction business, well, just get yourself a computer and learn to code. It is the most arrogant, condescending view of working men and women. Joe Biden also, first day in office, prohibited all oil and gas leasing on federal lands. We're seeing U.S. production dropping precipitously. Now, one of the obvious results of that is oil prices are going up, gasoline prices are going up. And a couple of months ago, the Biden administration realized, oh crap, gas prices are going through the roof and voters really don't like that. Voters get mad when you go and pay $100 to fill up your truck at the gas station. That gets people pretty upset. Well, so what did Biden do? He asked OPEC, will you please produce more oil? Now, I want you to think about just how incoherent that is. OPEC, whether it's Russia, whether Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, they produce oil much, much dirtier than we do. It's much worse for the environment. So they're literally shutting down massive production in the United States, where we were the energy superpower, the number one producer of oil and gas in the world. They're shutting it down here, much cleaner production here, and shifting to much dirtier production abroad by our enemies, many of whom hate us, many of whom want to kill us. They're destroying U.S. jobs here while creating jobs for Vladimir Putin. I mean, it is not something that is possible to defend on the merits, which is why the Democrats don't pretend to defend it on the merits. And the press doesn't hold them into account. And so, listen, I think Texas, for the next 2 years, for the next 4 years, Texas has a responsibility to be a voice of common sense, a voice of small business and free enterprise and jobs, a voice of freedom against the radical policies we're seeing coming from Washington. Because the problem is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have handed the agenda over to the extremes in their party, to Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and AOC. That is producing the disastrous policies we're seeing. But the good news, and I'm getting the hook right now that I got to go to the next meeting, but the good news is there's a natural pendulum to politics. And so if one party gets in power, they go too far one direction, the American people always pull it back. The other party gets in, they go too far the other direction, the American people pull it back.
But I don't think we've gone this far before.
No, we haven't. This is more radical.
It's going to be interesting where we end up in 2 years. Yes. And what we look like.
Look, I view my job as leading the fight against every one of these disastrous policies from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that is hurting the 29 million people in Texas. And I'm going to lead the fight every day. I'm going to do so with a smile, as a happy warrior, but tirelessly leading the fight. And we've got to get to 2022. 2022, I think, will be a very, very good election. Then we got to get to 2024. And here's a final closing point. In the 1970s, it took Jimmy Carter to give us Ronald Reagan. I think Biden is more radical, more extreme, more of a disaster than Carter ever was. And I think that is ushering in the stage for a strong, principled, conservative leadership to come pull us back to the common sense principles that in Texas we know work so well.
All right. All right, Senator, keep up the good fight. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.